Yeah, everyone, it's Ramley here. I have Tristan Palmer from San Francisco to chat a little bit about MVP. Hi, Tristan.
Hey Romley, how you doing?
Pretty good yourself?
Good. It is beautiful here in San Francisco, so I hope you
Ah,
guys are having a nice beginning of the summer too there in Toronto.
for sure. It's a little bit rainy, but it should be better soon enough. I noticed that you have a workshop coming up. Your MVP sucks. That's a really great title. Like there's a lot of MVP that really does suck.
Yeah, it's one of those terms that kind of is probably the most popular, bumper sticker form of lean startup, but everybody kind of hates also and cringes a little bit when they hear it. So it's not quite as bad as pivot, I guess, but um, yeah, it's one of those terms that's just so easy to misunderstand and so often misapplied. And Eric even occasionally contradicts himself on it. So, uh, yeah.
What is it about MVP that, people kind of they don't get it? Like what is it about that phrase?
Well, I mean, I'm sure you've experienced the same thing with the startups that you work with there, but it's just become a pseudonym for prototype,
Mm,
or in some cases, it's a pseudonym for prototype, and your minimum viable product might be like this crazy thing with 20 widgets and 9 switches and a Swiss Army knife glued on. In which case, it's like, no, you kind of missed the point. It's not just the thing that you build first. Like that's not what it is. And it's not the thing that you show to mom. Um, it's an experiment, ultimately designed to test something.
mm.
And people use it in different ways. Eric in his book, I think I don't remember the exact quote, but he says it's the minimum amount of a thing that you need to build in order to learn, in order to maximize validated learning. Um, and that definition is great if you want to use that. That's
Mm.
awesome. I mean, that means that your MVP, so to speak, could be anything from a concierge test, just performing your product value as a service. Could even be just a landing page. If the thing that you need to validate is will anybody buy this product, well then perhaps a landing page will do that. Or perhaps customer interviews will do that. Steve Blank goes into what he would call a lo-fi MVP, which might be just a presentation which explains what you'll ultimately build. Maybe it has some nifty screenshots that look like this product might exist. Something we used to call vaporware. Um, but you can use that definition. So under that definition, MVP is kind of any experiment that will drive you towards validated learning. I kind of and Eric occasionally says, and this is the one spot where he occasionally contradicts himself. He says, like, yeah, okay, it's about validated learning, but don't forget about the V. Like, the V is for viable. So
Mm.
it actually has to deliver some value that somebody kind of wants to pay for in some way, whether that's with cold hard cash or their attention span. So in my book, again, I'll use whatever term whoever I'm talking to wants to use, but an MVP has to actually deliver value to the customer.
Mm.
And so to that degree, an MVP is designed to test product market fit to some degree. It has to actually deliver some small chunk of value to the customer that the customer actually recognizes as value. Okay?
So then, like you look at landing pages and videos. In your book, it wouldn't be called an MVP then because it doesn't deliver value.
Well, so most of the time, yeah, but let's say that you're change.org, for example, and your business is getting people to sign petitions.
Oh, right. Hmm.
Well, I mean, signing up is actually very valuable because I signed the petition to save the whales, or stop terrorism, or whatever you want it to be. Like, I feel like a great person because I signed the petition. That's valuable to me. So in some cases that might be value, but it really depends on your business.
That's a good point, right? In terms of, you wrote a really interesting blog post a few weeks ago about, MVPs have to have four parts. You got to have the customer, the channel, the value proposition, and the relationships.
Yeah.
Which one do you say a lot of people forget? Do people forget, delivering the value more, or is it like they really forget really defining the customers?
It's usually the marketing channel, and definitely, well, Okay, so nobody forgets about defining the customers,
Mm.
right? So everybody thinks about it. They just define them poorly. So everybody's product, targets everyone, or SMBs, or mothers, and like it's just always such a broad segment with no real there's no real customer persona there. There's no causal reason. Like, why do these people have the pain? Like, does every single mother in the world have this particular pain, or is it particularly like mothers with toddlers, or mothers with 3 toddlers, or mothers with 3 toddlers who have to work a part-time job, mothers with 3 toddlers that have to work a part-time job, that it's a white-collar job. Like, a real detailed customer segment that causally explains why this person has a problem.
Mm.
That level of detail is almost always lacking. And almost always they're lacking, just a basic channel. I'm not talking about a scalable channel to reach 1,000 people or 1,000,000 people. I'm just talking about how many people do you need to test this value proposition. If you just need 5, then great. Go to the coffee shop, go to Craigslist, whatever it is you have to do. If the next step is like, well, no, we need a real sample size because we need to run a quantitative test, then okay, you need to build a slightly larger marketing channel. So your marketing needs to scale up with your experimental requirements, but you need to have at least a basic marketing channel. And so I think people almost never have that.
Yeah.
And some people occasionally do, and then the worst part is then they never really have the last part, which is the relationship. Like, okay, once somebody has my value proposition, how are they going to give me feedback?
Mm.
Or how am I going to call them for feedback? I have an email address. Have I used it? Do I know how to reach out to these people? Is this a real email address? Am I getting caught in spam? Wouldn't this be easier if I just collected a phone number to begin with?
Yeah.
There's many different ways that you can hack the system here, but like, you've got to think about that beforehand. How am I going to get feedback on this value proposition? Okay, and it's not just quantitative feedback. Like, you've got to be able to get somebody on the phone or over Skype, or at the very least over email.
That's a good point. Now, in terms of the process for clearly defining MVP, is that how you would go through it? Like, first define the customer, the channel, the value you're providing, and then how you're going to get feedback back.
Yeah, so those are kind of the basics to me. There's certainly a lot more to it than that. But I would prefer, always, like in a workshop, I would start with the customer. Unfortunately, most people have already kind of defined the value proposition and have an idea of what their product is, and so we kind of have to backtrack to customer.
Yeah.
But a channel is a channel for someone. Busy moms with 3 kids who work a white-collar job, like, you can't just say Google AdWords. Like, you can't define the channel without thinking about who you're trying to reach. So, busy moms with 3 kids. Where am I going to reach them? I'm going to reach them at 5 o'clock at the daycare center. Like, that makes sense. That is a channel for this customer. What is the value proposition for this type of customer? What type of relationship does this type of customer want? So everything kind of starts and ends with the customer.
That's a good point. Now, in terms of measuring metrics for, if your MVP is successful, what kind of metrics do you look at when you're telling people on how the success of their MVP?
Let's maybe.
Too broad?
Well, no. I mean, I think it's a good question, but I'm not sure about the success of your MVP. I mean, let's talk about
metrics.
Let's talk about this. Yeah, let's talk about the success of your experiment. It's like, can you run an experiment that actually results in validated learning? Like, this is where I hate the terms like validated and invalidated, or success and failure. It's like, it gets very confusing. What are we talking about? Are we talking about the product, or are we talking about the experiment? Like, I ran a successful experiment. Oh, so people want your product? No, people hate the product. But it was a successful experiment because I discovered that people hate this product. So a good experiment, okay, is what we want to focus on. So it's not like a successful MVP. Let's talk about a good experiment. A successful MVP is one where you learn something at the end of the day. So the metrics that you want to use to evaluate that are generally, you want to have a mix of quantitative and qualitative metrics. So very early on, you might just have some qualitative metrics.
Yeah,
Yeah, if you're trying to get people to the other side of the river, you don't need to, you don't really, well, okay, that's probably a bad example because you can just quantitatively measure, do they get to the other side of the river? Um, depending on what your value proposition is, if your value proposition is to make people feel good about themselves, yeah, that's going to be a really hard thing to measure quantitatively. Like you might be better off using qualitative interviews after they've received the value proposition. So I think it really depends on what you're trying to learn the most, and always, 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 I would start with qualitative, and have some quantitative, like even at a small sample size. So I run Lean Startup Circle here in San Francisco, and we'll have 100 people at an event. That's not a statistically significant sample size, right? So the quantitative data can't tell us that much. But we use Net Promoter Score at the end of every event, and every event is somewhere between 20 and 40% NPS. That's great. So when we have a sudden bump, like the last two events were 62% and 72% Net Promoter Score, which is like ridiculously good. Like it's abnormally high. So it's good to have that quantitative data, because I was like, wow, I had no idea. I didn't think it was that great, but I was busy like pushing buttons and like getting people drinks. So the quantitative data helps tell you kind of what happened, and gives you an indication that, well, something might be going on, and then you can investigate more qualitatively. So I could talk to people after the event, and I call people up and going like, what talk did you go to? There were 3 different sessions simultaneously. Was that one really good? Was that one really good? So I could talk to people and validate, or verify, I should say, whether or not the quantitative data was correct. Like, does it match with the qualitative data? And particularly at early stages, like having both of those, perspectives or gauges is really useful to see, like, well, does this make any sense? Because if they don't line up, then something's wrong, and I need to run a better experiment.
That's good. That's a good point. Other than like, what do you think about what did you think about this? Like, are there other questions that you asked to find out qualitatively reactions that signal that that something's working?
So I guess again, like any good consultant will say, it depends. The most important qualitative information, again, like face-to-face is better than Skype. Skype is better than email, or instant message. Instant message is better than email. If you can get somebody face-to-face or in person, I'm not listening to what they're saying so much as I'm watching them use my product, and I'm seeing them smile. Can't really fake that. I mean, some people can, but I can tell the difference between like smiling and a genuine smile where the corners of your eyes like crinkle up a little bit. Like watching how they use it, that to me is one of the best understandings of that, and it's not always possible. I have a friend who does it's an anonymous, it's a mobile phone application that allows you to take a picture of a part of your skin where you're worried about something dermatological based, and send it in anonymously to a doctor to get some sort of result. And as you might imagine, this is used in your nether regions quite often, right? So like that's not an application, like something that's based on anonymity of something very, very private, that he can watch people use and see if they smile. Like this is not good. But there are other proxies that you have to use, and definitely doing interviews post, or even doing anonymous interviews, like with the screen blacked out or anything like that. Whatever you have to hack to get the best qualitative data, like that's what you got to do. That's so good. It's not a specific question.
Now, in terms of other tips that you might have for somebody to create a better MVP, what are some other tips that you have?
Let's see. Okay, so tips to create an MVP. First and foremost, get somebody else to look at it. So
interesting.
No one. I don't know anybody who can design their own MVP. Like we all suck at it. I could tell you, Romley, like, if you show me your MVP, I guarantee I can cross off 20 features. if I show you my MVP, like, I guarantee you're going to cross off 30. It's like everybody really, really sucks at this. Even like, last week I was, in the post that you're talking about, the 4 parts of an MVP, even that post was 1,600 words long initially. Like, that's a long post.
Yeah.
It was over twice as long. And I showed it to my friend Kenny, and it was like, I don't understand like why these 3 paragraphs are in here. Yeah. And I argued against him. Like, I argued against him. I was like, oh, I need to show that. I need to show that. And then an hour later, I was like, fuck, he was right. So nobody can proofread their own material, and you got to get somebody else to take a look at it and ask you the hard questions. And we as entrepreneurs have to be humble enough to shut up and not try and defend our decisions and justify why that feature is there, but just shut up and go like, okay, why is he asking that? Could I remove that? And just try and do that. So if there's one tip I can give you, it's get somebody else to help you, because none of us can do this alone. We're all human beings. We're all frail and ignorant and kind of stupid when it comes down to it. So get somebody else to help you, and really just have the humility to accept another person's feedback.
Great tip. That's such a great tip. I think you're right. We can't proofread our own stuff.
Yeah, it's tough. I wish.
Well, that's all of that. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask you if you had any tips.
No, I'd say that's a great tip. That is a good point. Like, we get so attached with our own baby, right? We see we see our product as a baby.
Yeah, absolutely. And nobody's baby is ugly.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for your time, Tristan. Where can people find you online? Do you have a blog, Twitter?
Yeah, absolutely. People can always find me at Trikro on Twitter. That's TRIKRO, and my blog is grasshopperherder.com. So yeah, you can find me on Twitter is the easiest way, and that links back to my blog. So please shout out and say hello there, and I usually try and respond to just about everything. So you can reach me there.
And is your workshop full already, or can people still sign up?
I think there's 1 seat left, but somebody was just emailing me about it, so I don't know about that. It's a very small workshop that we're doing here in San Francisco, and I'll be doing bigger ones in Europe as we go on. So maybe one in Toronto sometime.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time, Tristan.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Romley.
Talk to you later.
Bye.